Okay, chapter 3 is on Jews on the left. So again, I'm just taking a couple quotes out of the chapter, but this is the kind of thing that pervades the chapter. Again, he's a Jewish intellectual writing The Middle American Jew. The Jew continues his search for an ethic or ethos which is not only universal or capable of universality, but which provides a cutting edge against the older traditions of the society. A search whose intensity is compounded and reinforced by the Gentiles' treatment of the Jew. So to unpack this, what he is saying is that Jews seek a universal ethic. Well, Marxism was a universal ethic. Jews who were Marxists did not identify themselves as Jews. They often took non-Jewish names. The point is that when they were leftist activists, they were not overtly saying, I am Jewish. But as it says there, this universal identity was useful as a cutting edge against the older traditions. When you were Marxist, you wanted to dismantle the entire superstructure of society. So the search is compounded and reinforced by anti-Semitism. So again, this is the complaint that they are in the background. Chapter 4 is on psychoanalysis and Freud. Here's a quote from a Jewish scholar of Freud. We find in Freud a sense of otherness vis-a-vis non-Jews, which cannot be explained merely as a reaction to anti-Semitism. It goes very deep. Though anti-Semitism would periodically reinforce it and modify it, this feeling seems to have been primal, inherited from his family and early milieu, remained with him throughout his life. Again, social identity theory is going to say that this is a very typical aspect of Jewish social structure, the sense that they are separate, that they're different, that the non-Jewish society is evil, bad, it's inferior, and so on. And a sense of moral superiority. That's one of the summary statement that I have at the end here. That's one of the points I'm going to make, is that all of these movements thought of themselves as morally and intellectually superior to the non-Jewish world, and to the injustices of an intolerant, inhumane, anti-Semitic society. In other words, their conceptions of non-Jewish society are entirely negative, exactly what you would expect given social identity theory. So Freud had this messianic hope. He really saw himself as this general, this leader of the Jews in battle against the non-Jewish world. He hoped to achieve the integration of Jews and anti-Semites on the soil of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis, in other words, was intended as a political weapon to blunt anti-Semitism and to end it by essentially construing the behavior of non-Jews as, evil, repressed, that kind of thing. Chapter 5 is on the Frankfurt School, the notorious Frankfurt School that Dr. Jacobs mentioned in this talk today. And psychoanalysis was a big part of the Frankfurt School. It was used to produce theories of anti-Semitism in which, as I say here, it attributed interpsychic conflict, sexual repressions, troubled parent-child relationships, while also denying the reality or the importance of cultural separation and group-based competition. Quite a few of the complaints of anti-Semites had to do with various Jewish economic activities, with Jewish separateness, with not really assimilating into the society. But all that was irrelevant to anti-Semitism in these theories of anti-Semitism that were produced by the Frankfurt School. The only thing that was relevant were these pathological parent-child relationships. And a big thing, I think, that has had a lot of huge influence long-term is that they saw that the German working class had eventually opted for National Socialism. And so they realized that it's more than class structure. It wasn't that the working class were somehow much more wonderful people and wouldn't succumb to anti-Semitism. So this was a formative moment. I think this was when these intellectuals began to think in terms that we need to have non-European people. In other words, immigration is the only solution for anti-Semitism ultimately. You have to bring in other people because the working class, championing the working class is not going to be a good strategy. These people actually gave up on Marx, gave up on Marxism because if you look at Marx, their idea in anti-Semitism would be this revolution and all that the working class had all this interest and all that, but they saw that wasn't going to work. So essentially they use psychoanalysis to pathologize any sense of group identity, and that's obviously something we've already been talking about here, the sense of us as being white, as being European, as being Danish or American, white American. That sense of identity is now not legitimate. You can't identify yourself in that way anymore, and if you do, you are seen as having psychiatric deficiencies, psychiatric disorders. You are repressing sexuality, or it's just a sign that your mother beat you up or something like that. That's all it is. So if you assert your identity as a white person, it comes down to that kind of pathology. So the key to ending anti-Semitism is to pathologize it, and ethnocentrism. And this is, I think, where the intellectual impetus came for mass immigration. You could see this after World War II. It wasn't just about getting more in America. It wasn't just about getting more Europeans over there or Southern Europeans. It was about getting Africans and Mexicans and everybody throughout the entire world to end the idea of a homogeneous white society. If you think about America, we had all these different ethnic groups come to America, all these white groups, from different parts of Europe, but we all became Americans. We all started marrying each other. Most of us have more than one type of ancestry. I'm Scottish and German. You're Scottish and English. We're all different. We're mixtures. But that wasn't enough, in their view, to end anti-Semitism. You had to bring in massive numbers of non-whites. So an awful lot of their research was aimed at finding a theory of anti-Semitism. And as Dr. Jacobs was saying, the modern fashion is basically the same as traditional Christianity. Both involve opposition and subjugation of nature. So they start to pathologize the total basis of Western society. Christianity, so the 2,000 years of Christianity is evil, leads to rejection of all that is natural, whereas Judaism is a natural religion, that they argued, and therefore superior. So again, it's sort of in-group thinking. We're superior, they're not. Chapter 6 was sort of an afterthought. It's not titled about the New York intellectuals, but at the end, as I was writing the book, I became aware of how important they are. This is a group of intellectuals centered in New York, obviously. Everybody would acknowledge that they are Jewish. And they were also had the same kinds of concerns with anti-Semitism. One of the most important ones was Sidney Hook. He wrote an article on anti-Semitism. The sources of anti-Semitism is to be found in the beliefs and habits and culture of the non-Jews, and nothing to do with Jews. Christianity. It's endemic to every Christian culture whose religion has made Jews the eternal villain. In other words, putting it right back to the Jews killed Jesus kind of thing, but it's pervasive. Again, this is a modern, very intelligent professor of philosophy at New York University. These are the theories they come up with. In their view, rural America, the South particularly, associated with nativism, anti-Semitism, nationalism, fascism, anti-intellectualism, and provincialism. This is New York versus the rural part of America. Rural America is white and tends to be sort of traditional, religiously, and so on, whereas they associate the urban, which is them, of course, with ethnic and cultural tolerance, internationalism, advanced ideas. They began with the assumption that the rural was fundamentally, corrupt. They had little to contribute to any culture. By interpreting the culture and political issues through this lens, writers could mask assertions of superiority and expressions of anti-democratic sentiments. Realize that this is what this is about, that they are claiming superiority to these people, precedence to the rural parts of America, and also it's anti-democratic because they don't trust the feelings of these people. One of the big strands of Jewish intellectual movements, political movements, has been anti-populism, the idea that people should be able to sort of determine policies. Instead, they want policy to be determined fundamentally by an elite, and that filters down. And actually, they have been very successful. You think about immigration. If you took a poll in America on immigration, most Americans would oppose immigration. But it doesn't matter, you know, those populist sentiments are not allowed to get into public policy. Okay, when it comes to immigration policy, Chapter 7 is an immigration policy. Again, 3 complaints. Anti-Semitism occurs when you have ethnic homogeneity. I think that was the lesson that Jewish intellectuals took from World War II, from the rise of National Socialism. As I said, the working class had embraced Hitler, and so the idea is that homogeneous societies are the problem. Jews, and of course they also had a problem with the fact that Jews had been excluded. As I mentioned before, the Protestant elites had excluded Jews from the best schools to some extent. Even then, Jews were in those elite schools at a greater percentage of the population than they were, but that wasn't enough. And as post facto, they have also often claimed that in 1924 we had a law in America, no more immigration basically, and any new immigrants should come in at the same percentage that they are now of the population. So if there's, you know, 10% of Americans are German, then 10% of the immigrants should come from Germany and so on. Well, that would pretty much exclude everybody in the world except Europe, because the vast majority of immigrants had come from Europe. So this was viewed as racist and all that. And after World War II, it was then blamed as part of the Holocaust that Jews were not allowed to immigrate, had not been allowed to immigrate out of Europe, from Poland and Eastern Europe especially, and therefore they were eventually victimized in the Holocaust. So that became a big rallying cry for Jewish intellectuals. There's a classic quote. Earl Rabb is a Jewish activist, really involved with the Jewish, the ADL and so on. One factor inhibiting anti-Semitism in the contemporary United States is that an increasing ethnic heterogeneity as a result of immigration has made it even more difficult for a party or mass movement of bigotry to develop. In other words, they see immigration as a safety valve. It's a way of preventing a homogeneous white Christian culture that might eventually turn against them.